What's up, guys? Welcome to the video. My channel is College Football Frenzy, back in our video, and today I'm going to be breaking down the top 10 matchups of Week 10 of the 2020 college football season. So at this point in the college football season, a lot of big matchups are happening, and a lot of matchups that are going to deeply affect the college football playoff race. It's a time in college football where you really can't afford to slip up because it might cost you a playoff spot. And there's a lot of good matchups going on in Week 10 that are going to deeply affect the playoff race. So it's going to be an interesting week. I feel like Week 10 overall has two top 5 matchups of the whole year. That's right, two top 5 matchups the whole year. So it's a big week for college football, and I'm very excited to do this list. And besides from those two top 5 matchups, you have some other big matchups that definitely could be very entertaining. So I'm looking forward to Week 10. Now, as for this series, guys, I just want you to let me know in the comments if you do like the series. I know it's not a prediction video or anything. If you guys want to see more prediction videos, you can just let me know in the comments. I'm going to try to come out with some more prediction videos in a few days. I know these videos aren't really prediction videos. I haven't done a prediction video in a little bit. But if you want me to do more of those, you can just let me know in the comments. I'm going to try to finish up this series, though, first. But without further ado, let's get into the top 10 games of Week 10. Starting out with number 10, we have a Pac-12 matchup, California versus Arizona State. I think California is definitely a team with a returning production that can make some noise in the Pac-12 next year. I feel like California has, the potential to be the second or third best team in the Pac-12 North overall. So they're pretty talented. And Arizona State, I think Arizona State, you look at their record last year, was 8-5, but hey, they beat Oregon, they beat Florida State. They had some pretty good wins. And they had a tough midseason slump. There were a couple games in which they shouldn't have lost that they did lose. If they don't have that slump, they could have very well been 9-3 or 10-2. So Arizona State's a team, in my opinion, that I think could make the Pac-12 championship game, win their division. A team that really I expect to be at least 8-4, probably 9-3. So I really think big things are going to happen with this program next year. They really could have gone 9-3 last year. So it's going to be, I think, an improvement for this program. They've got a great head coach. I think great talent. Benjamin's leaving, but still overall good program. So it should be a pretty good matchup, I think. Arizona State at home, tough atmosphere out favor of the Sun Devils, but California can definitely make it competitive. Number 9, we have Purdue versus Minnesota. So Minnesota was the surprise team in the Big Ten last year, and I think Purdue is the Minnesota of 2020. I think they're going to surprise a lot of people, in my opinion. I can't guarantee that they're going to have like a 9-3 record or something like that, or that they're going to make the Big Ten championship game. I really don't think they'll make the Big Ten championship game, but I think they're at least going to be very competitive. I think they can definitely make some noise and make a pretty decent bowl game. So I expect this match to be pretty good. Obviously, Minnesota is the more, known team, the team that obviously most people would probably pick in this game just because we know that Minnesota has a lot of good talent coming back. But I expect it to at least be a pretty competitive matchup. Next up, we have Florida State versus Miami. Big rivalry game here. It's definitely not the same as it was in the early 2000s. These two teams are definitely not as competitive as they were. But at the end of the day, it's a big rivalry game. One of my favorite rivalry matchups, in my opinion, top 10 rivalry matchup in all of college football. So I had to add it on here. Miami versus Florida State. I think these are two teams that will improve record-wise next year. I think Miami has probably the easiest schedule in all of the ACC, or one of the easiest schedules in the ACC. Florida State probably has one of the tougher schedules in the ACC, in my opinion. But both these programs should I think they'll at least still improve record-wise. And talent-wise, I think they'll improve a little bit. So I expect these programs to step up a little bit, and I think it'll be a pretty competitive matchup. Next up, Ole Miss versus Texas A&M. I've been listing Texas A&M on a lot of my top 10 lists, and it's not to scare It's not to scare Texas A&M fans, but overall they do have a lot of competition in the SEC West. I think Ole Miss will be pretty competitive overall. It's at Kyle Field. Texas A&M clearly has the better return talent, and they have the better recruiting class. But watch out for Ole Miss. They have Lane Kiffin, so I'm not going to rule them out. So I think it could be competitive. Next up, Virginia Tech versus Pitt. Virginia Tech is obviously a team that most people are expecting to be in the top 25 or next year. They had 1 week where they're in the top 25 last year, I believe. Overall, they lost their bowl game. They lost their rival Virginia, but still, it was a pretty decent season, and they were one game away from making it to the ACC title game. So they were a decent team overall, in my opinion, last year, and I expect for them to improve with their returning production. they have a good chance at winning the Coastal Division. They obviously have a lot of opponents that they're going to have to beat if they want to win the Coastal Division, but they have a decent chance. One of those contenders to also maybe win the Coastal Division, I think, is Pitt. I think they're a little bit of a sleeper, but they definitely could compete to win the Coastal Division with their really good defense. It's one of the best defenses, I believe, in the ACC, just in my opinion, so I think they're at least going to be competitive. I think this will be a good matchup, and hey, we know Pitt's being a lot of good teams as of lately that, just are in the top 5 or stuff like that. I mean, we can go back last year with UCF, a couple years ago with Miami. They came into that game, I think, ranked 2, and they lost to Pitt. Clemson, 2016. Clemson's only loss in 2016 came to Pitt. Remember, Clemson won the national title that year. And I don't want to go back to 2007. But West Virginia, hey, they beat West Virginia. West Virginia was a top 2 team coming in that game. So Pitt, they've got a history of beating good teams late in the season, especially. So I expect Pitt to be pretty good. I think they'll definitely put up a pretty good fight. So I expect a pretty good matchup. Next up, Oklahoma State versus Baylor. I think Oklahoma State will have a Baylor-type season for this upcoming season. I think Baylor definitely losing a lot of talent, especially on the defense, and losing head coach Matt Rule. That being said, tough atmosphere to play at. I think Charlie Brewer, if he steps it up, can definitely, play on the level that Oklahoma State will be playing at. But Oklahoma State, looking at them, probably a top 15 team next year. Chuba Hubbard, great running back, maybe the best running back in college football. So it should be a good matchup, so I'm excited for that. All right, number 4, we have Kentucky versus Tennessee. Third and fourth best teams in the SEC East, in my opinion. I think Tennessee, clearly on paper, is probably a little bit better of a team. They have a top 10 recruiting class. Kentucky doesn't, obviously. And I think they have some decent returning talent. That being said, we know how Tennessee fares with good talent. I'm not going to say Tennessee just because their talent's going to beat Kentucky at home. Very tough atmosphere, great talent, but we know what Tennessee, they've wasted a lot of talent. That being said, at the end of the last season, Tennessee looked like they had a great stretch. Obviously, they didn't play the hardest competition, but still, they had a great end of the season last year. I think they're going to use that as motivation to have a good season next year. So I do expect Tennessee to improve a little bit overall. But again, I'm not going to say that they're not going to slip up next year. And as for Kentucky, I expect Kentucky to be pretty good. I think they're definitely going to be competitive. I think they're mainly when looking at it, I think they kind of have a season in the middle of what they had in 2018, in 2019. I think they're a little bit better than they were in 2019, a little bit worse than they were in 2018. So I think Kentucky will overall be decent. Tennessee should improve, but overall, it's going to be a competitive match in my opinion. 2 pretty good SEC East teams. Number 3, getting to the good stuff here, USC versus Oregon. So, talent-wise, these two teams are pretty even, in my opinion. Talent-wise, they're pretty even. I think Oregon clearly has the better defense. That's just my opinion. They also probably have the better offensive line with Penei Sewell. But quarterback, a little bit more unknown, definitely. A little bit more unknown. We'll see who starts at quarterback. They have some pretty good weapons and a pretty good recruiting class. But again, the quarterback unknown, that's a big issue. USC, great returning production, one of the best in all of the nation. And of course, they probably have the best Pac-12 quarterback in Kenan Slovis. That being said, Oregon's at home in Autzen. And the thing is, obviously, Clay Helton's the coach of USC. Uh-oh, that's a big problem. I don't know why he's still there, but, see how it goes. But talent-wise, this is why it's so high. Talent-wise, these two teams match up pretty well, and, they really should be competitive against each other talent-wise. I will say, Oregon did beat the brakes off of USC last year, but USC had an absolutely ton of injuries. But we'll see how it goes for this upcoming season. If USC plays up to the talent that they have currently, then they can definitely make it competitive. So that's why I have it so high. It has the potential to be a really good game. But as for now, I definitely favor Oregon. But it could be competitive. That's why, again, I have it so high. Number 2, it was hard. I actually had it number 1 coming in, or 5 minutes before I made this video, but I just changed it up. Notre Dame versus Clemson. It was a tough one. It was really, really tough. I think both these teams could very well be coming undefeated in this game. Clemson, I definitely expect to be coming into this game undefeated. Notre Dame, exactly as sure, because they have to play a couple tough games before this, including Pittsburgh and Wisconsin. Not guarantees, definitely. They'll be competitive games. But overall, it's going to be a top 10 matchup, in my opinion, on NBC. It's going to be fun, a night game. This one will be very fun to watch. I still think game day will go here. I still think game day will go here, even though in my opinion it's not the best matchup. I think, it's a different atmosphere, so I hope and think game day will go here. But, we'll see. But overall, I think it's a good matchup. Clemson beat the brakes off of Notre Dame a couple years ago. But I think, at home in South Bend at night, Notre Dame can definitely make it competitive. So I'm not going to rule him out yet. And Ian Book is returning. He's experienced, so I think he'll be very good. So I think it'll be a good matchup. That being said, still need to look at Clemson on the offense. T-Law and Travis Etienne. Wow, that's a very good offense. And the defense is pretty good. And they've got a great recruiting class. So two very talented teams, to say the least. I think it should be a pretty good matchup. It's going to be a hyped-up one. But I put it at number 2, and again, I just switched it 5 minutes. I had this one at number 1, and I had my current number 1 at number 2 5 minutes before this video. But I switched it up, and at number 1, LSU versus Alabama. Of course, again, LSU versus Alabama, almost always the best matchup of that week, no matter what. Usually there's no matchup that even contests with the LSU Alabama on that week, but I think Notre Dame and Clemson's obviously going to be a very good matchup. But LSU Alabama takes the spot, and again, I just changed it. Listen, at the end of the day, this is what made me put them at number 1. I think even though LSU clearly has a lot of talent leaving, at the end of the day, these matchups are almost always extremely competitive. They're very tough matchups, very great battles. I think LSU will play more of a defensive style like they have before 2019. Alabama, the offense looks very good, so LSU is going to, has a tough offense to deal with. But I think LSU probably will try to resort to more of like the style they played before 2019 and maybe even before 2018, something like that. But at the end of the day, it's a hard-hitting matchup. Both these teams play their best games when playing this matchup. We've seen so many great LSU versus Alabama games, so I had to rank it at 1, even if Alabama has such a better returning talent than LSU. Even if Alabama's recruiting class is better than LSU's, I still had to put this at 1 just because coming in this game, it should be a competitive matchup. Aside from 2018, it really almost always is a competitive matchup, at least in Death Valley. So I expect it to be a competitive matchup. And Coach O, I think he'll be able to at least motivate his players and say, hey, we haven't won at home against Alabama in just about forever, because obviously they haven't won at home against Alabama in years. So I think it'll be a pretty good matchup. So I have it at 1, Notre Dame and Clemson at 2. Again, it's very interchangeable. Both such good matchups. I'm gonna be flipping through the channels. I'm gonna be flipping through like CBS and NBC at like 7:30. So it's two great matchups. But overall, guys, that's it for now. Thank you for joining in. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and thank you for joining in.